Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi barakatuh, everybody. I'm Preacher Mars, host of the SOS, the Shout Out Show. You've made it to another Thursday, better known as Throwback Thursday. Today's topic, we will be talking about the concept, the sovereignty of sitting down to have a meal, and all the things that come along with that space. Because everybody's so busy these days. It's interesting how time is slotted for people. Everyone is so busy these days that they don't eat together. Mom comes home at a different time, dad comes home at a different time, kids eat early, and it's not a bad thing. They have sports, they have their own independent lives. But there was a point in time where that whole idea of sitting down to eat and having a prescribed eating time, if you will, dinner time, is something that we gotten away from. I'm guilty. I don't eat at the same time every day. I try to eat around the same time, but I don't eat at the same time every day. And I grew up in a household where, doggone it, we actually had dinner time. You knew what time dinner was going to be on the table. You were there. In my house, it was about 5:30, 5:45. You were there on the spot. And here's the killer part. If it was 6 o'clock, it's only because his parents had to deal with traffic. And as you got older, the child, you helped prepare the meals that mom and dad would do. You make sure that meat was ready to go. So all they had to do was the vegetables. I'm going to talk about this a little bit because I kind of feel like there is something that is aesthetically missing. The spirituality of being able to sit down, commune, and have food, break bread. For Muslims, we have Ramadan. Alhamdulillah. Ramadan is once a year. One of the largest scopes of Ramadan, one of the things that is can't be overlooked, is the idea that when you break bread, you're not supposed to break bread alone. This is a community action, therefore, it requires a community feeding, better known as iftar. Well, there was a time basically where you have iftar darn near every day. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and most definitely on Sunday. Saturday was a little move, but Sunday you definitely had to sit down, and it may not even be in your house. So, I want everybody to kind of begin, if you will, to rewind some of the your memories a little bit and start thinking about some of the meals you used to have, what time you used to have those meals, what they involve, and think a little bit about the history, if you will. If you could go back 20, 25, 30, 40 years, 50 years for some of us, and start remembering that point in time when you couldn't cook, right? You couldn't decide what your meal was. And you would wait in the kitchen, you would watch your mom or your dad prepare a meal. And they would put that meal on the table at certain times. And you had particular jobs. I know as a young kid, I had to do things like, well, I couldn't get in there in the stove, obviously, because I was young, but I learned things about teamwork. The preparation of the meal had to do with teamwork. And I learned a young ethic about making sure, while I can't cook the food, I can't peel potatoes, I can't be around a stove. So I learned how to put place settings down. The phenomena, if you will, of setting the table. Setting the table. And I asked her, when's the last time you set the table, brothers and sisters? Now there are going to be some questions that we're going to bringing up, and I'm not trying to bring in. And this has nothing to do about the quality of anybody's cooking. I know some people are like, well, I ain't eat that food. That's not what I'm saying. I'm talking about the advent, the advent of the community meal, the community meal. And I'm going to look at, particularly from the African American side, why it's so important. Why the community meal was so important. It had less and less to do with food. I would put out there. I would offer this out there. It had less and less to do with food and had to do more and more with connection. So we're going to take that whole idea. We're going to twist it up. I'm going to talk about some of the things that began to affect the home cooked meal, dinner time, the regular dinner time, something about fast food. Also, the aspect of having food that was accessible and portable. And portable. Because this whole idea about food is not just nutrition, it's availability. So I don't want to hold up any more of the show. I do want to take a moment to give a heartfelt shout out and condolences to people down in Miami where this bridge collapsed. That was wow. It's really hard to verbalize what that is when you see the picture of it. We just hope people are okay. And if they're not okay, we hope that they heal. And if they return to Allah, as we say, from Allah we come, to Allah we return. There definitely going to be some fatalities. They already have one, but this is, of course, the idea that a building fell. You now have to wait to remove rubble, to find loved ones and things like that. So this is a tough part too. The other thing is, I'm actually my hometown. I mean, in Washington D.C. on 295, they actually had a part of the bridge that broke down on 295. I don't know which bridge it was. I think it was by Nanny Helen Burroughs Avenue. But the bridge, the walkway, actually fell down on 295, and they had to stop traffic both ways. And they're doing that right now. They're trying to actually figure out I guess the sturdiness of the bridge, the reliability of the bridge. So they're going to do that as well. So prayers out to Miami, prayers out to Washington, D.C. In D.C., they didn't have anyone who was hurt. People taken to the hospital. They were they had non-threatening injuries. But in Miami, we have a problem. We have people who are definitely injured. So let's go ahead and get the show started on Preacher Moss SOS. Let's roll. All right, everybody, welcome back. This is one of those days, man. This is Throwback Thursday, so I'm gonna actually try and take my time and be point specific. I'm gonna try not to go too deep or delve too far with this. And there's no conspiracies, brothers and sisters. I want you to know that there are no conspiracies talking about dinner time. I'm talking about the evolution of how people spend time. That's probably a better way to talk about it. But before we get into that, if you're coming on the show for the first time, welcome. We appreciate you dropping by. Do us all a favor. Don't be a wallflower. If you have something that you want to say, you want to express yourself, or something you want to get off your chest, jump in that comment section. Let us know what you're thinking. And also, if you're here for the first time, on the way out, if you don't mind, click that subscribe button, click that notification button, and click that like button if you happen to like the show. All right. So if you're on the show for the first time, let me tell you how this works. We have other people who are stars in the building. While I'm the host, I do not own this platform. I always say that it is the people in the comment section, the people that drop by, that actually make the show. A lot of times you don't feel it. The stars always say, I'm the show. Yeah, well, if nobody comes to see you, then you just a guy talking to yourself with amplification. This show is the amplification for the people who come on the show, the people who are in the comment section, who have things to say, who affectionately I give shout outs and they give shout outs to their people. These are what's known as the stars in the building. So we just want to take a little time out, brothers and sisters, to recognize our stars in the building. Let's roll. First up, we got Sister Ree, who's saying she's giving thanks, of course, for all those birthday greetings. That's right. That's right, Ree. You only turned 21 twice. No, I'm just kidding. You only turned 21 twice. No, I'm glad you had a good time. I'm glad you're back home safely. We'll talk. And peace and blessings again. Happy birthday to you. It's always a blessing when somebody gets another year in, brothers and sisters. Glad you made it back safely. All right. Next up, we have Sister Sakina Mujahid out of Charlotte. How you doing, Sister Sakina? Wa alaikum assalam rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to the show. I think Sister Sakina might actually have some aspects on this space right here we're about to talk about. Peace and blessings to you and your family. Hope everything's going well. Sons and daughter. Hope everybody's going well on your section. Thanks so much for dropping by on the show. All right. Next up, our official Canadian ambassador to the show, Altaf Rashid. Wa alaikum assalam rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you, brother. I appreciate you coming on the show as always. 6 o'clock, straight up, straight down. and you make it better for us on both sides of the border, the U.S. side of the border and the Canadian side of the border. I appreciate you, man, and thank you so much for tuning in and being a devoted fan. I don't say fan, a devoted member, brothers and sisters, the Shout Out Show family, the Shout Out Show soldiers. Thank you so much. Next up, what's going on, Sister Mamie? I'm glad you made it to the show. Good evening, preacher. Looking forward to yeah, and I want to make sure that you get some comments in, Sister Mamie, because food is so much more than food. It's so much more than cooking it, chewing it, smelling it. I mean, food has all kind of levels to it. And I just want to kind of get there as much as I can in this brief segment. I just want to try and get there as much as I can. Thank you so much for tuning in. I appreciate you. Next up, we got Sister Ika coming all the way from Indonesia. This should be right up Sister Ika's alley right here. This should be in her wheelhouse because she does catering. So she knows all about how to prepare meals and make sure that the presentation is right. Also, not the presentation, but the anticipation. I'm going to talk about anticipation with family dinner, brothers and sisters, because we don't even talk about that anymore. Okay, next up. We got my brother, Wa alaikum assalam rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. What's going on, little brother? Peace and blessings to you. Yes, I was upset with the game last night. I'm not going to lie. I thought it was a poorly coached game. And if Coach Bud doesn't get his act together and they get run out of there, he's going to get run out of there too. But aside from that, man, I appreciate you always supporting your brother coming on the show. Please give hugs, salutations, and greetings and kisses to the family up there in Milwaukee. Let them know that they appreciate it by one Preacher Moss. All right, next up, we got our consultant producer, Sister Satana Whitfield, working the ones and twos on the production side. We appreciate you. Thanks so much for coming on the show. Not only coming on the show, but making the show what it is. I mean, when a show expands, brothers and sisters, you can do different things with your show. Let me explain this. It's sort of like when you learn how to help your mother or your father cook, it expands what they're able to do. So if you could beat some eggs in a bowl, that means they don't have to beat eggs in a bowl. It means they can focus on their head, and when they need it, it's just right there. And it allows them to, in some regards, shorten the cooking process, but it's also trusting you around food, trusting you to make sure that you're part of a process. All right, let's get to it. Whatever happened to family dinner time? For a lot of years, brothers and sisters, family dinner time was a sacred time. Just like Sunday dinner, family dinner time was a prescribed time, whereby you could do everything you wanted to. But at this point in time, you were going to eat. Particularly when you were younger. Your dinner time was pretty much fixed. Whatever mom and dad said, that's what it was. And it went along with the idea that whatever they cooked, you ate as well too. So you didn't have different menus. Let's just talk about that. You didn't have different menus. Whatever mom cooked, that's what you ate. Okay? Whatever dad cooked, that's what you ate. Let me tell you why that's important, brothers and sisters. Because it was a respect to the process of not cooking the food, but being blessed to have the ability to go out and get food and put it on the table. As we develop different tastes and things like that, I want everybody to understand this term. I saw it on Netflix. The term is called high on the hog. Now, I'm sorry, Muslims, but calm down. The term is called high on the hogs. This was a slave term. And high on the hog meant that after the master would eat everything off the pig, he'd leave the scraps. He'd leave whatever was left. And that's what slaves used to make their food. Now, you can make all kinds of arguments about, the bad meat and stuff like that. But let's be honest. You're dealing with reality. And even more so, brothers and sisters, slaves had dinner times. Let me say it again. Slaves had dinner times. Slaves took dinner. I'm talking about African Americans in bondage. They took that time to be not just a time to eat and refresh and have a good diet, but I also took it as a time to have a communal understanding of what everybody was doing. You see, the dinner time, if you will, was a check-in time. When I was younger, you could not sit at a table in silence. I think everyone will back me up. You couldn't sit at a table in silence. It was a check-in time. The words like, how was your day? What are you up to? How's class? You learn that from a very young age. And even now, I say these things when I'm talking to people. Hey, your food all right? You good? Da, da, da. And it's even conversation away from dinner, but it is conversation that's connected to having strong community. And I asked the question, whatever happened to family dinner time? Whatever happened to family dinner time begins with one word in that question: time. The advent, brothers and sisters, of being able to have products, concepts, I won't even say distractions, eat away at that time. I admittedly say, I openly admit that family dinner time changed for me when I was younger, when I started playing sports. So when I started playing sports, it disrupted when we would eat, which meant that I wasn't eating at this time. I would go to practice and things like that. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. You still had the idea that you still had a dinner time when you didn't have practice. But I point to this, and some of you may know what I'm talking about. On Highway 95 going south, you will go to, look at Sister Mamie said our dinner time was 6 o'clock. Ours was pretty much 6 o'clock too, Sister Mamie. I'm going to throw this out here. I realized that dinner time was changing on a trip going down south to Orangeburg, South Carolina. And here's how it changed. You remember how you used to go on trips and you would have to pack food to take and you have to have your drinks and there was a need for a cooler? Even back in the early 70s, you may stop at a gas station, but they didn't have the whole rollout of food, which meant that you had to, in some regards, prepare food or stop at a restaurant and eat. Those were your options. One vacation, we were going down south, and in an off ramp, we saw a McDonald's. That's before they did all the advertising and stuff like that. But the idea of McDonald's, brothers and sisters, at one point in time, McDonald's was a treat. It was an anomaly, an anomaly, if you will. Going to McDonald's was a treat. It's something you would do maybe let's say once a month. It was actually on the scale of when you would go out and get ice cream. That's what McDonald's would be. And somewhere in the line, McDonald's figured out the magic recipe, if you will. Pardon the pun. They figured out the magical recipe to become even more ingratiated into family life. And I think the interesting thing with McDonald's, and anybody can jump in, was McDonald's have food and offer. Now I'm old enough to remember when McDonald's would close like 7 o'clock, not like 24-hour McDonald's. But McDonald's figured out a way to ingratiate themselves into family dynamics. And the portability of food, number one, meaning you could take it anywhere. That's food you could put in the bag. And accessibility to it. McDonald's offered one of the few places that didn't fall in line with what? A dinner time. See, back in the day, you used to have a breakfast place, you'd have a lunch place, but dinner time was normally at home. McDonald's destroyed all of that, as well as so many of the other fast food places that came along with the same formula. And now, when you would go home, brothers and sisters, this is me back in the day, you would ride down Route 450 when I was a kid, and you wouldn't see anything. There was no McDonald's, there was no Burger King, Subway was 20 years later. You wouldn't see anything. Take a ride down the most populous throughway in your neighborhood, in your city, like the biggest main street. And what you're going to see is a strong peppering of all these foods. These are all the foods before you get to your house to have food. And I would go out on the limb. I ain't going out on the limb. I would even say that, it entices you to be hungry before you get home. It entices you to want to eat something before you get to your house. Now, if that feeling is that strong, when you're close to your house. Imagine how strong that feeling is when you're 50 miles from your house, or you're 100 miles from your house, or you're 200 miles from your house. And that feeling, I want to say that strategic positioning of all these food places is what we're dealing with today. The aspect of a home cooked meal uh, is basically now we will fix food, but the larger aspect of something that's home cooked or made by hand, that's your Olive Garden now. That's your Red Lobster now. And I think it's smart marketing because they tend to offer you specialties that either you can't make in your house or they take a really, really long time to make in your house. The importance of dinner time, if you will, if you give me a salam, the importance of dinner time is that it allows for an experience. You know, there's nothing more resounding when your mother says, or your father says, hey, go in the freezer, hear me now, go in the freezer and take something down for dinner. I said that to a young guy today. He looked at me like I had 4 heads and 8 backs. I said, when you go home, what you going to take down for dinner? He said, what do you mean take down for dinner? He had no idea what I was talking about. The act of taking food that has to be thawed. And you would thaw that food you would thaw that food and it better be ready to be cooked when mom was ready to go. Let's go to some comments real quick. I remember everyone having dinner around the same time, and you knew because you wouldn't get on the phone call. Now the calls come whenever. Altaf is correct. Altaf is 100% correct. We do not really prioritize dinner time. Different scales. Now, a brother I was talking to tried to tell me, he's like, when women went back to work, I was like, nah, this has nothing to do about women in the workforce. Stop. I said because a woman gets off at 5 o'clock and a man gets off at 5 o'clock and everybody hungry. So just stop. The scope that I do want to investigate is that we don't talk about dinner time anymore. We don't really talk about eating together. And it's this loss, if you will, this communal loss of being able to sit down and have a meal and also have a conversation around the meal. I have a friend of mine. His wife does a cooking show. It's on Instagram. It's called her name is Tammy Vincent, wife of Troy Vincent Sr., former NFL football player. She has a show called Stay a While on Instagram. It's on Mondays at 6:30, I believe. And a lot of their conversation, larger conversation about social issues, is largely wrapped around what? Food for the soul. One of the greatest films that ever came out about family was about what? Food, soul food. Not only did they have a movie, they had a series. And I think, and I don't want to make a stretch, I think, but the spiritual nature of people getting around, like you think about the food you eat during Ramadan as opposed to when you eat any other time. Just focus on that. The food you eat at Ramadan as opposed to any other time. If you fast, the food that you eat after a fast, not in Ramadan, look at the connection that you have with that food. Look at the relationship that you're tying in. You're growing a new type of valuation again about not just eating and consumption, but gratitude. And the one thing about when you're doing, brothers and sisters, let me say this, dinner. Crafting a dinner. The one thing you want people to be, what? If you didn't make the dinner, then what? Doggone it, be on time. If I had to really give you a synopsis, I'm going to say, listen, and here's a great example. My grandmother lived to be, alhamdulillah, 94 years old. I want to say for 94 of those years, I want to say for 74 of those years, I basically on Thursday, I always knew I was going to have a meal. We used to call it Spaghetti Sunday. And Spaghetti Sunday, and I've told you guys about Spaghetti Sunday. But here's the thing about Spaghetti Sunday. I always knew what time the food was going to be put on the table. And there was a certain amount of reliability that my grandmother had, that I was going to be there, not to make the food and not to eat the food. What was it, brothers and sisters? To set the table. And in setting the table, I found, for lack of a better word, a peace, a connection with my grandmother. Now, this is how important this is. I told you how old she was. She was doing it. I was young, and we still had a connection from the time I was young to the time she passed away. We still had memories and talked about the whole aspect of Spaghetti Thursday. And that's not that the spaghetti was that dope. It was just that she made it, and she made it with love. So, in this question, I said, whatever happened to family dinner time? We stopped having it. That trip home didn't have the anticipation of a meal on the table. That trip home was, we were distracted by the McDonald's and the Popeyes and the things like that. And you realize, and I'm going to say this, sorry, Starbucks, but places like Starbucks and places like McDonald's, when they hire their employees, they hire their employees to make sure that you're not going to have a certain quality of life. So you're either going to miss breakfast, you're going to miss lunch, or you're going to miss dinner. A lot of people don't want to hear that. You know, the hours, if you will, they don't lend themselves to quality of life. And so the whole idea of dinner time was something to be sacrificed, not celebrated, and not protected more so. It was this whole idea that dinner time was the thing that kept families together. If you ever have had to, I had this as a teacher. I was doing a home visit with one of my students, and his mother knew that I was coming. Unbeknownst to me, when I showed up, he was excited. His brother was excited. Here's what made it happen, brothers and sisters. I showed up during their dinner time. And to sit at a table, knowing that this family didn't have a lot of means, they were struggling. You could throw out stuff like being on assistance or whatever. But this woman, around dinner time, crafted a really, really good dinner. And as I sat at the table, I realized that I wasn't the guest. I wasn't the guest. I was, for lack of a better word, a witness. When I say a witness, I mean a witness to the fact that despite everything they had going on, they had somehow saved this little bit of normalcy that they were going to have dinner together. And I ate the food. Of course, they asked me, what do you eat? Because I was like, I don't eat pork. And I had the chicken. No, it wasn't halal, but it was darn good chicken. And I'm going to tell you why it was darn good chicken. Because when the lady bought it out, brothers and sisters, she still had sweat on her brow. And I said, ooh, that's going to be some good chicken right there. And to put your face in a plate and feel the heat come up lets you know that that food was made with purpose. It was made as a priority. And of course, it was made as a privilege. So as we begin to talk about this, whatever happened to family dinner time, let's be honest. Corporations got a hold of it. I guess I can say that. Corporatocracies looked at family dinner time and said, we got to get rid of that. Think about family dinner time in the inner city. Just think about this. In the toughest neighborhoods, you still had dinner times. So imagine if a kid has to leave at 5:15 to get home at 5:30 to set the plate to eat at 6. And they eat from 6 to 7. And mom asks them what they're doing, works on with their homework. You know what they're not, brother? They're not in the street. They're not in the street. The conversation, brothers and sisters. I mean, there was a time you could look down my street at 5:36 and no kids would be out. And the reason they wouldn't be out because we all had to eat. Food, family dinner time was a refuge. And I'm sorry, brothers and sisters, as soon as we went away from it, for lack of a better word, people capitalized on it. It wasn't there. So now when you're coming home from working out, you don't go home directly and see your mother and see what she needs. She's in the kitchen or she lays some food out. She puts some food. No, we stop at McDonald's. Why? Because it's convenient. Why? Is what everybody else. It's a sucker roll, if you will. My mom said, now we go to McDonald's and bring cooked food home for dinner. Like, Lord, I ain't even gonna lie. Sometimes I'll go and buy groceries on the way home. I'll stop at Waffle House. There you have it. I just bought groceries and I still stop at a place to eat on the way home. You see how sick this is, brothers and sisters? I need help. I got a problem. I got a problem. But at least I'm open with mine. I own it. And I'm honest. I'm honest. But I have to go to the point that people realize that family dinner time had to go away. The same way I say family dinner time. You take the time away, there's no dinner, and eventually, guess what? There's no family. And you don't be foolish, and I think that people have not thought that up. You know, we can't find appropriate grocery stores in some of our inner cities, right? Can't find appropriate grocery stores. We're talking about food deserts and things like that. Oh, but you can find a McDonald's in the middle of that joint. You can find a Burger King in the middle of that joint. You can find food places that serve the worst food at the highest prices. You know why? Because everybody is vying for that. Dude, and this is something to think about. Just how valuable the family is. Family values, eating together, communing together, speaking together, uh, praying together. Just think about how important that is. And then look at the world. Like, look at where the world is in terms of individuals. You know, food is a unifying thing. You know, in our worst tragedies, a funeral or something like that, we lose a family member. What do they serve at the end of it? They serve food at the end of it. And I think that whole scope, if I have to say so myself, is a divine intervention. Can I call it divine? It's a divine intervention. I don't think that human beings all of a sudden came up with, you know what, let's eat at 6. It was a congealed experience that they had, going back to hunter gatherers. It was the experience that we are going through a process. And the time to eat is when the time is the time when the food is prepared. And more we got away from that. It's different. It's different when you go down south and you actually eat the food that you've planted. You know, it's different when you eat something that you raised, a chicken that was running around. That's the chicken you eating that night. So look, I'm over time, but I just want you to think about some of these things we talked about. Whatever happened to family dinner time? One, family dinner time was attacked. Time, dinner, family. You know, they're moving it off. I want to say they're moving it off the scale, if you will, and it's been attacked. You know, and it's funny because you'll go to a McDonald's. What do they try to do? They try to make it appealing to your family. They try to make the inside of a McDonald's look like you're going to a picnic. It's not a picnic. It's a dirty McDonald's with a slide and rubber balls. Don't be fooled. Don't be a sucker. So I just want to throw that out there, brothers and sisters. I know you have things to do and I don't want to hold you up. So let's get to our sponsors. We want to give a shout out to www.befinanciallyindependent.com. Again, that's befinanciallyindependent.com. www.befinanciallyindependent.com. You call 1-888-496-6845. Again, that's 1-888-496-6845. All right. I also want to give a shout out to Bayan Islamic Graduate School. Much love to you guys. I tell people to go check it out. Even if, just check the website out. They have some really, really amazing lectures on there for some of the visiting scholars that they have. I don't encourage everybody to go there. If you're thinking about getting a quality graduate level Islamic education, then you don't want to miss that on Bayan. Particularly the MDiv program for Muslim chaplains. I think it's a very unique program. I didn't go through it, but it's a very unique program, and I think it's the only one that's in the country that's available. Don't sleep on it. All right. Listen, you guys have been great. I'm going to get out of here. Take care of yourselves. And if you get a chance, Eat with your family. Do dinner time. I'm Preacher Moss. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Ah, there you are. I know you're looking at your screen going, that's a good looking black man. And you're right. I'm Preacher Moss, and you're not. Today, I want to talk about Olive Branch Muslim Family Services, better known as the people who help people. And I need you to help the people who help people so they can continue to, you guess it, help people. Get it? Got it? Good. Olive Branch Muslim Family Services. Action you can see, compassion you can feel. Graphic now.